series on grief. It's a three-part series on grief. Welcome. I am a spiritual care chaplain. I have worked at several hospitals, and one of my parts of my job is just being with people at the end of their life, taking care of them, providing support for them, for their family, their loved ones, as their journey ends. And often as they continue their process, they will come to one of my grief support groups that we offer. And so I can continue to offer support. You might not know why you're here today, but we do, and we're glad you're here. Today's topic is understanding grief. People aren't quite even sure what it is. We have to really dig down into what is grief really. There's a lot of information here. A lot of times that we say in support groups that I have attended over the years is take what you need and leave the rest. So a lot of it might not be pertinent to you. You might understand, you already know it, and so on. Okay, I have been facilitating grief groups really for decades now. High school, church, meditation centers, and so on. Okay, during COVID in 2022, as COVID was winding down and places were starting to open, some friends of mine who were psychotherapists, social workers said, "Chuck, we really need to put together a workshop. You do so much work with this. Could you please design a workshop, like a 3-session workshop that we could all attend, and of course invite people who are actively suffering?" And I said, okay, that made sense. So I put together a workshop, and this is essentially what you're going to be seeing over today in the next 2 parts. So please stick around. Please stick around. I think you'll get a lot out of it. Okay. So, universal cultural views of grief. What are things like in this country? Well, it depends on what cultural background you are, for sure. The indigenous Americans might be a little bit different than people of Northern European descent, something like that. We're the way our country is. But I will tell you that it's worldwide. I've been really studying and investigating for years, really. How is grief handled? Death and dying. How is it looked at? How is life and then the inevitable, our mortality? And I actually have a friend who came from India, and we had a long discussion. And he said that when he was a boy in India, they were told if anyone died or anyone wanted to talk about death, the elders would say, "Oh, let's talk about something pleasant. We don't want to talk about that." So he said it was just something that people were uncomfortable talking about. People didn't talk about grief and death very much. Okay, when he came here to study to the United States, he found as the years went on, we had the same view. We didn't know how to talk about grief. There was no training on it. There was no workshops. There wasn't a lot of information on it. So he was really surprised. He also noticed in America, families often are separated. We're not all living in communities, like small communities, like you might have in some certain parts of the world. And he noticed that so often people are dying in nursing homes. They're dying alone. People might not visit them. That was my own experience when my mother was in a nursing home. People might show up on Sunday for an hour. People are kind of forgotten about in this country. And so when people die, they often die alone, which is very sad. So, but people are starting to face the fact more and more now about man's mortality. A big part of it was Dr. Raymond Moody. You might have heard of him. He was an emergency room physician, and he noticed that when he resuscitated some people, in other words, their heart stopped, their breathing stopped, brought them back, they could see what was going on during the resuscitation process. He also noticed that people were very in tune to even something that happened on the other side, maybe visiting family members and so on. So these are called NDEs, or near-death experiences. And so this is something that is pretty commonplace now. As a matter of fact, when I'm with patients who are facing a terminal illness, I will often bring that up about near-death experiences, and that gives them a lot of hope that people have actually talked to who've had that experience, okay? One of the other things I've noticed too is that I've noticed over the years that many people, when I talk to them after their loved one passed, they don't, when I say, what, you want to talk about the funeral and the next steps, and a lot of times they'll say, oh, we're just going to have him cremated, we'll do maybe a memorial service in 6 months or a celebration of life. They don't want to have closure right then. They just want to go home from the hospital and forget. Basically, did it ever happen? Oh, we'll just cremate him, we'll worry about it later. So people are always kind of, still in a way, kicking the can down the road, I think, regarding this, because death is unpleasant. They don't want to deal with it now. Let's just move on, right? Okay. So, all of this, I don't want this to be a downer for you guys, okay? The grief workshop is about getting to a place. I want to give you guys hope. There is hope, but how do we get there? We might feel we're in a cave, but don't think of it in the ground. Think of a cave up on the mountaintop, and the sun is peeking out. That's how one of the ways I think of hope. The sun is starting to come up. There is hope, okay? I gotta switch to another. I'm doing my workshop. This is what I do, okay? All right. Okay, so one of the things that regarding this whole idea of death, Raymond Moody, Near-Death Experiences book, Life After Life, 1975, there was also another person, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that talked about grief in death. And we learned that there's all different types of grief. So the first type of grief, there's 6 main classifications. There's loss versus grief, okay? What is loss? Loss is something that you can replace probably. In other words, you lose your job. I've had that happen 2 or 3 times in my life. I was very depressed. I was scared and all of that. But I was able to get another job. I worked and worked. I was able to get that back. People move from a location they like, a country or a neighborhood, to maybe another part of the country. They miss the neighborhood. They miss their friends. But they can acquire new friends. They can start a new life wherever they are. Okay, so there's usually the idea of replacements. Even during COVID, a lot of the religious services were closed down. Muslim synagogues, churches were closed. Temples were closed, okay? But then they came up with Zoom celebrations where nobody was there and their place of worship was Zooming them out. So a lot of those became available online. Even AA meetings went Zoom because my recovery center had closed. So that was a tremendous help for me. I started my day like that, okay? So there was a replacement. There was a loss, but we were going to get back, okay? But grief is actually, the person you lost is not coming back. That really is grief, okay? So the dictionary meaning of grief is deep sorrow. You may have deep sorrow because you left your friends or lost your job, but it's usually, according to dictionary definition, it's especially caused by someone's death. Okay. Now the next type of classification of grief is simple versus normal grief, or simple and normal grief. Stages of grief winding up in 12 to 18 months. I remember when my mother passed some years ago, people said, oh, you'll be okay in a year. I actually wasn't. I might have been a little better, but it took longer, okay? But stages of grief winding up in 12 to 18 months considered simple or normal grief, okay? In grief support groups, the hospital, it's interesting. I often get people 1 to 2 years after the loss because they say this is not getting better. It's not, and we'll talk about that in a minute, okay? So, but the normal time, maybe don't need support group, maybe read a book on grief, don't need a lot of help, okay? Your life continues, you recover from the pain, okay? Number 5 is complicated. To recover and heal, we in fact might need a support group, such as psychotherapy. There's an element of open time involved, okay? This is bad. My brother-in-law, who was like a brother to me, died by suicide 2 years ago. this was very complicated for my wife and I because now we had to take care of his family. Financially, emotionally, we had to step in and replace my brother-in-law. So that's definitely complicated. And we'll get into that. I actually started going to Al-Anon groups to help recover from that because I was guilt and all that, and we'll talk about those stages, okay? So even though I'm a grief counselor and do groups, yeah, sometimes I need support too, okay? Prolonged grief disorder. This is something the American Psychiatric Association added to their mental health guide, and that is that an intensity of grief that stops people from continuing with their daily lives beyond 6 to 18 months if symptoms don't improve. They just are not returning to their life. They are low functioning, we say, okay? Their life has been turned upside down, okay? This is important because we found that psychiatric drugs, interestingly, it's a psychiatric thing. A lot of times they use drugs, psychiatric drugs, to heal people from depression, for instance, bipolar disorder. But American Psychiatric Association, what we found is that drugs do not help grief. Grief is not depression. It's just not. And it's sadness. There's elements of sadness, but it's different. What happens is there's loss of meaning. You're not able to function, okay? And it's because you're grieving. It's not because you don't like your job. It's not because your marriage is bad. It's probably none of that. You had a loss, and it's keeping you from functioning. So I was actually, I've had patients actually who were on psychiatric medication, and when I talked to them about grief and that they were just actually grieving, they actually said, oh, I don't need to be on drugs anymore because and they just absolutely just picked up. They said, there's nothing wrong with me. I said, no, there's nothing wrong with you. You know, you're just grieving. You know, that applies to anyone watching this program. There's nothing wrong with you if you're grieving. It's this unique feeling, and it's just a journey you have to go through, okay? So therefore, then, support groups, all that kind of stuff would be appropriate, okay? All right. So we're going to continue on. So that's just so you understand the different types of grief. That's why sometimes people will say, oh, my grief is just like yours. We'll get to that in a second also. You don't know what they're grieving. You don't know what it's like because you don't always know, are they going through complicated grief? Are they going through acute grief? You really don't know. So we really have to just not assume and be judgmental and think, oh yeah, I know what you're going through because you probably don't. Okay? So the next thing we're going to do is the stages of grief. And I mentioned before, she was really beginning this whole grief discussion, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she said there were 5 stages of grief. We found out more; it's more like 10. It's really important. It is so important to realize this. But the discussion started in 1969. I remember when I lost my dad. Soon after that, I remember that people were saying, "Oh, are you in denial? Oh, Chuck, like coffee break, are you in denial? Oh, it seems like you're depressed. You're quiet today." People were like throwing it around like banter, it's funny. But anyway, but we thought, you would start out, you would go through this stage, this stage, this stage. But we've learned a lot over the years since 1969. So let's learn, and we might not experience all stages. Everyone doesn't go through every stage of grief. And in my grief groups, I have to keep saying, I've had people in my group say, oh, Chuck, I haven't hit, I've been coming to your group for a year and a half, and I haven't hit bargaining. And I said, that's okay. Do you want to hit bargaining? Do you want to hit all the stages? We don't want to do it. There's approximately 10 stages, depending on what you read. I use 10, so you might not experience all stages. The stages often recycle. This is really amazing. I'll share some stories later about that. So they recycle. You might go through anger. You're resentful about what happened, whatever, you're angry, and then you resolve it, and then something else comes up, you go through it again. Stages sometimes overlap. So you could actually be going through depression and anger certainly at the same time. Okay? So it's multifaceted is my point. Okay? So the first stage is denial. Okay? Denial is something that I see quite often, actually, when I'm in with patients whose family just had some trauma or possibly full arrest or possibly passed, okay? And denial, quite often, matter of fact, that's the first thing I usually see people, they go, oh, okay, well, what happened? Do you know what caused their death? They're very matter of fact because they haven't wrapped their minds around the fact that they're never going to see their loved one again, okay? And so some people call it shock and denial. Sometimes they can include that shock and denial, okay? And that's not a bad thing. This can recur for a very long time and tends to recycle. I've actually had somebody from my groups that they quit coming to my group because they're fine, and then they come back and they say, you know what, I'm in denial. I think my loved one's going to come back and walk in the door. I go through this every day now. This is ridiculous. Am I going to go through all the stages again? Because denial is often the first one, denial and shock. And I'll say, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. Okay. So disorganization is our next one. Disorganization. Boy, this happens. My mother passed. I could not find my car keys. I'd go downstairs. I didn't know why I went downstairs. I mean, this just went on and on. Forgetfulness, absent-mindedness, missing dates and get confusion, causes loss of self-confidence. Am I having a senior moment? Am I getting dementia? So those issues come up. So one of the things I'm going to talk about in further sessions is, practice, being in the present moment, yoga, taking a deep breath. Okay, relax. Why am I going downstairs? So I write a post-it. Okay. There's also on YouTube. There's a good video called "Mental Reset in 5 Minutes." So there's actually a lot of resources just on YouTube about just being mindful to clear up the confusion in your mind. Just deal with this thing right here in front of you. Okay. So then we have anger, of course. It can provide a strong emotional outlet, venting, releasing, okay? It's okay to feel anger. Particularly some people that are very religious come to my groups and say, well, I shouldn't be angry, I shouldn't be angry. One of the things we'll talk about later, there's no shoulds in grief. In the journey of grief, you feel what you feel. I shouldn't feel this way, I should be doing this. Do what you need to be doing, okay? Make it simple, okay? But on the other side of grief, and on the other side of anger and venting, actually what's on the other side of that, you know what's there? Sadness. So this is one of the easiest things to have because anger, I'm just ticked off and whatever. When in reality, a lot of times once we vent, once we let go of that, then all the sadness comes up. And we can't get to a point of accepting, which is our final stage, one of our final stages, if we don't get through the anger. The anger keeps us stuck. This is the thing I hear. They blame doctors. If I had had a different doctor, I told them not to go to that doctor. I should have gotten another opinion. The caregiver was negligent and let them slip in the shower. I get insurance companies. If they had covered that procedure or didn't take so long to cover it, it would have been okay. Or their own self-care. I was always on them to take their medicine, and they would always forget. Maybe that's why they died, okay? So, later we'll show you the feeling wheel. We'll tell you how to move through anger, okay? All right, bargaining and guilt. Bargaining and guilt. We might try to eliminate the pain by rewriting the story of what happened. Did I do this? Particularly when my brother-in-law died by suicide 2 years ago. For months, I'd spent all day rewriting. Well, if I had done this, if I had forced him to go to an AA meeting, I kept going over it. So the idea is changing the narrative in hopes of changing the outcome. And I think this is a way, almost like denial, like it calms the mind, it gives the mind something to do. Well, I could have, and you're retelling the whole story, almost like this camera's recording me right now. Changing the narrative, what's going on, okay? If the person is still alive, I will turn my life around if you let them live. I've had people whose loved one essentially is going to pass, maybe in intensive care, and they're still saying, chaplain, priest, pray for a miraculous recovery. I'm praying to God. I will go to church every Sunday if they live, you know. So that's part of bargaining. If they are deceased, they blame themselves for not doing more to save them. Okay, wishing we could have done more, blaming ourselves for their death. I killed her. My sister blamed herself for killing my mother by deciding to withdraw her from life support and go into comfort care. So that was something that she had to work through, and it took a few years, and then it took me a few months because then I got triggered. Okay, replaying what happened in our mind can give us a feeling of control. It gives us a feeling of comfort, assuming erroneously that things have played out different, and that's erroneous. It's not true. But if things have played out differently, we would not have so much emotional pain now. Okay. Okay. So number 5, stage 5 is physical and emotional distress. Okay. This could be loss of appetite. I see people losing weight. They can't eat. Grief tends to do that to you. Although sometimes people go into binging. Okay. Just the opposite. Prolonged neglect of personal hygiene, not taking care of themselves, crying, sobbing, or wailing at odd moments in a grocery aisle. You know, just things get triggered and it hits you. We call it the blue wave sometimes. Alcohol, drug, or food abuse. When my father died, my mother was a fairly young widow, and she absolutely could not deal with it, and she was always a party drinker, but she became an alcoholic, and she was drunk daily for the next many years. So that was sad. She eventually got sober. I 12-stepped her, but that was just something that's how she dealt with her grief. She didn't know about the stage of grief. That was fairly new. It wasn't really well known, and she just went into complete emotional and physical meltdown and just drowned in alcohol. What happens with people? They have low energy, they have helplessness, possibly thoughts of suicide even. Fearing the future without their loved one. This is something too, because the holidays are coming up, and the holidays coming up, this triggers a lot of people. Some people don't even want to be around their loved ones because they don't know how to go to a holiday party without maybe their partner, or they're afraid if their child passed, what are people going to say, or they don't know how to feel around even people that they love. But don't worry. I would say don't worry about it until you get there. Don't fear the unknown. A big part of the journey through grief is to just show up. And we'll talk about that more. Okay. Okay, so stay right there. We'll be right back.